I'm actually just going to introduce Nikkole, and she can talk about how AMC managed to be AMC over the last few years. I think that apart from talking about Nicole Kidman and her work at AMC, probably the next most impactful person in the company has been, how do we think about, we're going to talk about how we think about fandom. We're going to talk about how we think about the live experience from a quintessential live experience, especially to hear Nikkole say it, right? The magic of film has to be experienced in a building with others. And we're gonna unpack that for the next 30 minutes. So let's start with, I think, the question that everybody's thinking. So starting in about March of 2020, what did you do all day?
I'm going to answer that question, but first I want to correct something. I don't think that the magic of film has to happen in
I don't either, but that's why I want to unpack it.
That's not a direct quote from Nicole.
No, not at all.
But I do believe there's nowhere else like experiencing film in a theater, right? I feel like there's something about that relationship between the larger-than-life screen and the individual and the community. But we're no fools. We don't think that theater, exhibition is going to stay the way it is, right, or has been. We're going to continue to evolve with everything and everyone else. And that's where part of my role, one of my roles, lands. So I'll start with when all the theaters had to close. The day all of our theater doors closed, what we immediately did was begin to plan how we were going to open. So, of course, we had to begin to furlough people. So we furloughed quite a few. Many we brought back. Many went on to other roles. But we also had to figure out how we were going to open, how to open safely. We engaged Clorox. We engaged Harvard School of Medicine. And we, for months, worked with them around planning on how to make the theaters safe and ensure that people felt safe. And not everyone did, right? Not everyone's just rushing back to theaters. But incrementally, we're growing our business back. So we're very confident that we are going to continue existing. It just may not look the same way that it did 7 years ago. We also began, as we started to open, so think about 12 months later, as markets began to open back up, we opened our theaters in the markets where the markets were opening. Mm-hmm. And we were doing it with our, Safe and Clean program. That's what we called it, AMC Safe and Clean. And what we're starting to see, right now that we're fully open, our people are coming back. The content, we had to start planning around the content. Of course, when we were starting to open, a lot of the studios had bailed. Warner Brothers said, hey, we're just doing day and date. And some other studios said, hey, we're all shortening the windows. But even before then, when we were opening market by market, we had to find content. So we were going to studios and finding repertory content. We were bringing back oldies but goodies and theming them and things like that. So we were constantly planful, and we were just working day by day.
It's a great answer, and it hits on several things, right? I think that thinking about how do we make the theater feel safe is certainly one, and certainly working with Harvard and certainly working with Clorox helps do that, right? I think that the two other ones that you kind of started to get to are interesting that we'd like to open up a little bit. One is about this idea of content, right? What kind of content, especially on the heels of the last group, talking about what does new kind of content mean for you, right? We talked a little bit about what does new kind of content mean for film students, what does new kind of content mean for game companies, what does new kind of content mean for you as AMC?
Yeah, so I'll start with film and then other content. So film-wise, for the last 10 of my 13 years, I was focused a lot on inclusive programming, driving people back to the theaters more often. So films outside of your 4-quadrant films that mean something to everyone, right? We now target certain markets. So I play Filipino film, Spanish language film, Indian cinema in 8 different languages. There are lots of pockets where we're actually like driving more around people's social and cultural interests, as well as the broader films that are supposed to meet everyone where they are, like the Mario Brothers that broke records last weekend. Didn't just break records from 2 years ago or a year ago. They broke records
Like
from
the original record.
right, the original records. So again, it's possible. We will be okay. Beyond that, I own what we call alternative and live content as well. So we've played Mayweather fights, right, live. We've the Met Opera for 10 plus years, live, the whole series, right? UFC fights. Events, we eventize some films where you just will bring something back and it'll have like a director's cut or something like that, or a live interview at the beginning or end, so that we're kind of driving more, like eventizing the theater experience. And so I think we're going to continue to evolve in that space. So we're having, I had conversations with Aaron Braun, who's probably gone now. But oh, there you are. Yeah, I had conversations with Aaron, right? And so, we tried to make a few things happen. You never know what happens down the line. But, we get creative. We're out there, constantly sourcing other opportunities for people to commune and it not necessarily be a traditional film.
How are you thinking about content that exists outside of the film experience itself, whether before or after or at home? How does that enhance or change or evolve with respect to,
Yeah.
got to get there at 10, got to get there at 10 to watch your film and then you go home. How do you think about the before and after?
Yeah, I think that everyone can play in the sandbox and it can be, a cohesive experience. With theatrical, I like that people essentially are focused on the screen. And they're not at home going, hey, okay, let me grab this my own popcorn. Well, by the way, that we have in
not as
Walmarts
good,
now.
admittedly, not
We
as
have our
good.
own popcorn in Walmarts.
Oh, that's just as good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
60% sold out, 60+% sold out in Walmarts the first week. I'm pretty excited about that. Anyhow, but
I
like the,
big butter squirting thing, because that's
Well,
that's the key to the whole thing.
well, we have one with extra butter.
There
There's
you go.
3
That
kinds.
solves it. Yeah.
Shameless.
Here.
However, but essentially, I think every experience is different. It's amazing to have the big screen at home and be able to watch what you want, right? But it's also amazing to walk into a theater and hear the sound. Some people, of course, who can afford it, have their sound and have their, full theaters at home. But sometimes when you're not doing this the entire time, or you're not, it's an entirely different experience. So and I've said it before, all of this happened. We can all exist. It just, we all have different things to offer.
I agree. I think that one of the things there's so many, like every answer that you've given has 2 or 3 more questions that flow out of it, which is always the mark of somebody that's good at these sorts of panels. But the thing that I think is interesting in there is, how do you go get that group that, oh, there you go. That's very helpful. There's a mic closer sign that you guys can't see, but now you're getting, that's really nice.
And,
Thanks, guys.
and it's red.
You guys
It's
are
like
doing
red.
great work back there. Very, very much appreciated. All right.
I'm talking like this.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think that there's this question of who the fans are, and you already hit on it a little bit. This idea of making content that is not 4 quadrant, right? But the other group that I think is an interesting one that I'm interested to hear how you are approaching is there's a sort of maybe not a generation, but there were a number of years there where we didn't take our kids to the movies. And they didn't get that ingrained. Like, I grew up going to the movies, and going to the movies was like, it was a really big, really special deal, right? And I took it's her birthday today, so took my now 5-year-old to see Puss in Boots, and she's like, I could feel it in my chest, Daddy. And like that is the magic. That is the magic of film, right? This is the magic of being in the theater when that happens. How do you think about bringing families back? How do you think about broader demographic sort of outreach?
Yeah, so we think about it a lot. Content drives the attendees quite a bit. So what you see with Mario is because for many weeks we didn't have a family film, too, right? So we do. We're constantly kind of marketing and promoting to families around these films, right? We're dynamic now, right? We're not just promoting everything to everyone. And we have a very large loyalty base. And our loyalty program is like three, a lot of people don't know there's like three versions, right? A-list is one, but Premiere is another, and Insider, which is free, is another. So we're often like navigating, well, who has seen these four films that would like this film? And we promote directly to them. And now studios are even investing in us to reach our loyalty members so that they can market smarter. And so we're constantly thinking, and pre-COVID, it was about getting younger people back. But I think it's not about that. It's about how are we bringing some of everyone back. And we're not going to bring all people back, but how do we continue to drive people per their interests versus just kind of a blanket spraying a fire hose, at everyone.
Well, and your answer very similar. The idea that content is what drives it, right? It's the stories that matter. It's the content that matters. In a lot of cases, in particular with Mario and with game-driven stuff, it's the IP that matters, right? Mm-hmm. We acknowledge, we see this piece of intellectual property that we're familiar with. How are you thinking about being part of IP that isn't traditional sort of film IP, right? Mario is an easy one, but like, how do we interact with the panel that came before? How do we start thinking about getting gamers into?
That's a great question.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. That's awesome.
For a few years, we've actually met with a number of gaming companies that are either creating new ones or trying to figure out how to kind of live action, like bring people in. We've tested this a number of times. It's interesting because everyone has this great idea, but then when you put it out there or you try it, no one shows up. So we're fiddling. It's something that we're open to. But even pre-COVID, we had a few tests, and we tried where people would just come watch these huge gaming. Where two guys were like really popular guys in the gaming industry, and they were like playing each other, mm-hmm. right? So there's an audience watching them live wherever they're being satellited from. No one shows up, but of course the auditorium they're in is packed, and people might be watching from another network, right? So when you talk about these other platforms, those, we learn, right? It's a bit challenging. So when it's gaming, they may not necessarily want to come to AMC and grab a bag of popcorn and watch it. They want to watch it from home or at their friend's house or at the actual event. So we continue to build on those learnings and then try new things.
I appreciate how so much of this is ultimately, to a certain degree, experimental, right? Because we're still relating to the fans of content mm-hmm. in ways that didn't exist, frankly, when a lot of us started making content. Like, there's a whole bunch of people in this room that this is their nth pulse, right? And this is their, however manyth sort of conference around how do we get content to people. And I appreciate that you're sort of embracing this experimental strategy. How does loyalty to something like AMC, which is not a content house, right? Which is not itself an IP shop. Mm-hmm. How do you create loyalty to? You talked about the loyalty programs, but how are you creating people that really want to embrace the place of AMC?
Yeah, so I would say the brand has kind of evolved over the years. I've been with the company 13 years, but pre-Nikkole, there was plenty of there were plenty of AMC fans, and I think it was because in the DNA, it started as a family-owned company. It's 105 or so years old now, right? But it started as a family company in Kansas. They were the first to build stadium seating. We were the first to kind of reinvent some of those, even our kind of larger screen formats. we tried a lot of new things. And even when we reseated a few years ago, then it's like, we're the largest in the nation, right? So then the next one over, they start reseating. Then the next, so we're constantly trying to figure out the new things. And so it's kind of exciting because when I'm hired and they say, hey, we need to diversify the kinds of content that's playing on screen, go. Yay, right? Because then the world's my oyster and I get to do, and they have that spirit. It doesn't mean you don't have to have a plan, and it doesn't mean you don't have to have like 7 boxes checked before you can go. But I think that AMC kind of leads in that way. Now, post the last CEO and current Adam Aaron, Adam is a force in and of himself. And so with Adam Aaron came a lot of the chutzpah around the stock, when we had that very interesting. There's not.
I didn't know we were going to open up this whole box, but
yeah,
now
I'm
really
and
excited.
I'm watching my words, but I just think everyone in the room is well, at least half the people in the room have to be aware, and so I'm just trying to give a little. I'm just trying to be as candid as I can around these folks that should know.
No, you're at the Anderson
matters.
School of Business,
This
right?
stuff
Like Anderson
matters,
School of
right?
Management.
But
you're at a business school.
Exactly. The way he handled that, I think, and by the way, we had a new chief financial officer at the time as well, but the way they kind of went behind and did the homework and managed how to kind of leverage what was happening in the zeitgeist around AMC and GameStop. And so, and there were already fans around AMC, right? If there weren't, they wouldn't have rallied around to, kind of feed what we saw in that nice little rise in the stock value.
Yep.
And it just takes, I think, an innovative company to kind of lean into those things, because many others may have kind of taken a step back and just let things happen. I think I'll stop there.
Don't worry, I won't. So I think maybe a different way to look at that, maybe a different way to think about it, isn't to think about necessarily through the lens of the stock price and how you guys finance things, but through your lens, right? So you've been at AMC for 13 years, right? You were at AMC, pre-pandemic, during pandemic. We can argue, still pandemic, but sort of less, right? What made you excited about? I mean, rather than view it through the lens of the market or view it through the lens of the stock, why? You can go work anywhere else you want to go work. Like why AMC? Why? What is it that gets you excited during all of that? During all those times?
I like having my own autonomy, and I just happen to have that in the. I'm the only person in LA, by the way. Everyone else is in Kansas, but I like that they give you room to explore new ideas because it's authentically who they are, right? So start there. I also appreciate the way the senior leadership, like the access that we have to Adam on a regular basis, and that we are constantly asking the what else. So when the doors closed, right, and we all started huddling, trying to figure out how to, how are we going to open again, and are people going to come back? It wasn't, oh, poor us. We're, everything's shot to crap. We lost. It was very much a, what else? Like literally, I was on my laptop the next morning. I was doing the 7:30 a.m. calls because everyone was 2 hours ahead in Kansas. But every single morning, there wasn't a week off because the doors were closed. It was, what else? What can we do? What other ideas? How do we get content? How do we, and that really invigorates me because I don't do well in, I think, environments where you just kind of like sit and wait for things to happen.
Well, what are your three favorite what else's that you did do during that period that you're the most proud of, or that you feel like were? And I'll the next question is going to be, you know, which ones do you think weren't as successful, but like which ones are you the proudest of? And it might be that one of the ones that wasn't successful is one you're proud of anyway. But what do you think were the most successful? What's next? What else during that period, during the COVID sort of height of COVID?
So I alluded to this before, but some of the programming that we were beginning to do, we got even more aggressive, and so, you know, you would see like live concerts, and like IMAX brought, because we're one of the biggest purveyors with IMAX, so IMAX brought Kanye live twice, and they were like fascinating.
These were pre Kanye, not like now. Kanye.
Yeah, this was pre. This was. This, I mean, what is a pre Kanye? But
yeah,
it was pre.
Fair point,
it was pre. It was when people were still dialing in, and no one was going, "Oh, don't take his calls," right? But I would also.
You're acting like that's not a fair question. That's a.
I'm trying to, because I feel like everything we did was a what else, but
Yeah, but just your favorites, right? Like, I think that not everybody realizes how much work there was even after the doors closed.
But that's
right?
just it. Well, that's the point. But there was so much work that I don't have like 3 wins. I think the win was beginning to open our doors and not filing bankruptcy. You know, I mean, those are the wins. At the end of the day, it was a real thing. You know, that, hey, are people really going to come back? So the wins are just, you know, week 1 going, oh, okay, someone's coming back. Week 2, oh, a few more. Week 10, okay. Those are the wins. I can't remember, because we do 1,001 things a week. So I can't really think of like, yay, us, besides we're open and, oh, it doesn't look like we're going to close. Okay, I can hire these people back. That was a win, right? Because now
Absolutely.
we're able to prove that we, you know, are going to be more sustainable.
How did you start
Not
to
a
think
sexy
about the 4-quadrant film, which is, I think, what a lot of people, I mean, there's a sense, I think, in Hollywood broadly that was the only kind of film that was ever going to work again, right? That we were only going to do the big Marvel movies, that we were only going to ever do the big blockbusters, that we were only ever going to do, you know, $200, $300 million budget films, and that was the only thing that was going to bring people to the theater. I think that was even beginning before COVID, starting to think about that. How do you think about opening the aperture on that so that it's not just the big 4-quadrant blockbusters?
Yeah, so interestingly, before COVID, I had already been working with 50-ish, anywhere from 50 to 60 different distributors on bringing content to screens. And we had a direct distribution program that we had launched pre-COVID. So we could open a film on 1 screen, we could open a film on hundreds of screens. And what I appreciated was when we first started opening doors and major studios weren't saying, oh, yay you, let's open. They were continuing to push their films further down the line because they wanted to see what the others were doing. A lot of the independents were leaning in. And so we did begin to have new content, but guess what? It was by the A24s and the Neons and, you know, the roadside attractions. All those guys were Bleecker Street, the guys who used to lead Focus features. So that was fascinating and a really good story for me to be able to share with leadership too, because I think people kind of didn't realize what a force they are, and that because they have a little more autonomy, they can, you know, make these bets. And I think that paid off, because that fresh content, not only were we relationship-wise even closer because we were managing each piece so deliberately because it was that important, you know, when fewer people were coming to the theaters. But I was even more creative as we negotiated, because I negotiate what they get paid out of the box office. But we were able to get creative around that too. So with shorter windows, some of them we were special kinds of deals in order for everyone to win, versus things have to be this way and this many days and you're getting paid this. And so I feel like that made us better for it as we continue to move out or move through COVID.
Do you feel like your work there has been influenced by the data that you're able to collect from your audiences, or how much of this is just, as you've said, the sort of the DNA of AMC, being willing to try, being willing to take chances, and how much of this is sort of a data-driven set of decisions? How are you thinking about it?
A lot is data-driven, but most of that will be around like the broader marketing team, because you have to think about, I'm focused on the content, but there are people in the organization that are focused on AMC, the brand, the actual theaters, promoting the buildings, right? And so understand who is buying popcorn and who's buying candy, and what else do people want to see. So we definitely, stay aligned and ensure that we understand what the data is telling us. And there are also a couple of organizations that almost every exhibitor kind of pulls these reports to understand what's happening across the marketplace. And I think a lot of people don't, I shouldn't say understand, but don't care to understand. And it's not your responsibility to. But for us, it's important to really know who we are, the markets we're in, and why we're different than our competitors, and how we continue to be different from our competitors. Because we kind of have personalities as brands, just like people do. And so the data helps us learn even more around how folks are.
So last question
at us.
before we open it up to some audience questions. When you talk about sort of going forward, when you're thinking about sort of the next piece, whose content are you most excited about? Where do you think, you talked about the difference between you and your competitors. What kinds of things are you seeing that are going to differentiate AMC from the rest of the space, and in the content in particular, with the content in particular, because that's your area of expertise?
Well, I think with the content, we're already doing it, and it's really leaning into understanding who our audience is, all the pockets, all the differences, and promoting directly to them, as well as some of the broader stuff. I think that it's not that some of the others don't, but some don't have to, because their audiences look a certain way, but given our footprints, right? We're in the cities, we're in the malls, right? So we have a very urban footprint. Half of our guests are Black and Latina. And we know that, men started to come out faster than women. So then we start digging into, well, how are we driving? How are we getting the women back, right? And again, we don't control the content, but because I have more flexibility with some of the independents, now I'm able to diversify some of the offerings when we don't necessarily have a lot of diversity coming from, and I mean diversity in genre and film, right, coming from the studios. Because some of them now are just doing the same thing over and over again. Others are starting to understand, if I throw this horror flick here while they have this family, and then they start to play. But some of them don't play in the same sandbox either. But I think we're starting to see that with the last couple weekends. Now folks are understanding, when you have something for everyone in the theater space instead of being on top of each other all of the time.
And with that, walk down memory lane as well. Go to the movies. We're over our time, but go to the movies, go to AMC. Thank you very much for your time.